Okay, so we are on to Unit 3, Lesson 2. And in this lesson, we're going to use angles formed by parallel lines and transversals. So we talked about the relationships and naming them in the last lesson. In this lesson, we're going to apply those relationships to when we have two parallel lines being cut by a transversal. So the first thing, we talked about corresponding angles. Corresponding angles, when formed by parallel lines in a transversal, the pairs of corresponding angles are congruent. That is an important property of corresponding angles. This is only true when these lines are parallel. And the way you can tell is those little triangles, those little arrows, to show that P and Q are parallel. So we got some practice identifying, but here we're given that one measure is 120 degrees. We're going to identify all of these other angles using things we already know, okay? So I'm just going to start with angle 2, okay? Angle 2 equals, I'll do the measure of angle 2. The measure of angle 2 equals 60 degrees. The reason angle 2 is 60 degrees is because the given angle and angle 2 are a linear pair. So I'm going to write the explanation there as these are a linear pair, okay? That's why angle 2 is 60 degrees. I'm going to move on to angle 3. The measure of angle 3 is also 60 degrees because it is also a linear pair with the given angle, okay? And then angle 4, measure of angle 4, that is 120 degrees because 120 and angle 4 are vertical angles. Okay, so that allows me to find all of those angles that are right next to our given angle. So next, for the rest of the angles, I'm just going to use a different color. I know from that property we just talked about that the measure of angle 5 is 120 degrees, and that is because it is corresponding with the given angle. That is the reason why. And then basically, it becomes the same problem as the angles that were on the left, meaning the measure of angle 6 and the measure of angle 7 both equal 60 degrees, and that's because they are linear pairs with our given angle. And then I'm going to kind of write it up here. Measure of angle 8 is 120 degrees because it is vertical with that angle we just found out. So really you could give different definition or different explanations, but if we're going based off of this given angle every time, we can kind of use a lot of different logic and properties we already know to figure out the rest of the angles, okay? So adding on to that, another property, alternate interior angles. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, the alternate interior angles are congruent, and I want you to write this down. Alternate interior angles are congruent. Alternate exterior angles. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, the alternate exterior angles are also congruent. And then finally, consecutive or same side interior angles. Those are not always congruent, but those are always supplementary. And that is remembering from before, that definition of supplementary is they add to equal 180 degrees, okay? So this is going to have some implications for finding angles and setting up equations to find angles. So in this next example, I give you some expressions. We're going to find the value of x. So when we look at this, I have angle 4 here. This just means angle 4. So I know the measure of angle 4 equals 115 degrees. And it's important that you write that out because those are vertical angles to each other. Okay? Now, the equation I can set up an equation where x plus 5 plus this angle equals 180 because those are same side interior angles. So, I'm going to set up this equation. X plus 5 plus 115 equals 180. And the reason I can say that, they're same side interior angles. That's important, okay? So it's remembering that property from the last page of the notes. Those are same side interior angles. They add to equal 180. So I'm going to finish out solving this equation. First, I'm going to combine like terms. X plus 120 equals 180. And all I have to do to solve that is subtract 120 from both sides, making x equal to 60 degrees. So x is, well, I guess maybe not degrees, but x is 60. I guess I'm not necessarily finding the measure of the angle, but I'm finding that x, that value of x. So it's knowing how to name same side interior, consecutive interior, and then using that property to find a given or find a missing measure. So, guided practice, good opportunity for you to test finding the different measures. And there's multiple answers to this, so I can explain this further if you need me to. But I'm going to give you a chance to pause the video and work through these on your own, and then check your answers with me. Okay, so to explain the guided practice, I asked you to find just the measures of angles 4, 5, and 8. So from each of these, I'm using that original measure of angle 1 being 105. So all three of these angles are 105, but the thing I want you to get down is what relationship you use to find that measure. So angle 1 and angle 4 are vertical, which makes them the same. So that's my explanation for angle 4. Angle 5, 1 and 5 are corresponding, so they are congruent, they are the same measure. And then angle 8, they are alternate exterior angles, meaning they are congruent. So it's always going back to those properties, all right? That table of properties I showed you earlier. For number 2, if the measure of angle 3 is 68 and angle 8 is 2x plus 4, how do I find the value of x? Well, I'm going to use the fact that angle 3 and angle 7 are corresponding, making them the same measure. If they're the same measure, that means angle 7 plus angle 8, and I'll write that in, angle 7 plus the measure of angle 8 equals 180 because they are a linear pair. So that's why I set up my equation in this way. 2x plus 4 plus 68 equals 180. I combined the like terms and I solved and I got x is 54. So it's about knowing the relationships so that you can set up the proper equation to solve. And then this last example, we're just applying this to a context. So it says a balloonist sees a car at a 37-degree angle of depression, meaning angle 1 is that angle of depression, making angle 1 37 degrees, okay? So that in that diagram, angle 1 is 37 degrees. What is the measure of angle 2 and how do we know? So the angle you'd be looking up at the balloon at. So the measure of angle 2 is also 37 degrees. And the reason I know that, if we look at this as two parallel lines, the ground and the line of sight, if you're looking straight off from the balloon, those are parallel, and you got a transversal. That makes angle 1 and angle 2 alternate interior angles, making them congruent. So again, it's about knowing the properties, but also applying them. So naming and applying the properties. So I think this is enough for you to move on to the next part of the lesson, which is just going to have you get some practice identifying the properties and using the properties. After that, you're going to work on the practice and then the checkpoint.